Okay, this is Jeff Segor again, and we're on video 7 of this programmer's journal to create a web server and a web application using a recipe manager. So I'm going to see how much I can pack, how much information I can pack up in this one video, because this is sort of the core piece of what we're going to be doing. So far, we have gotten our basic source control in place. We've got some the primary packages installed for Angular, and now we're at a point where we're going to create the server itself. And I'm going to show you where that code's going to be. We're going to be installing a new package called Express, and this is going to be used primarily with Node.js to act as a router to accept what's called RESTful API calls from the Angular client. And so you'll see how all these pieces work together. Now, I'm not going to explain REST. I think it's much better to go to these sources here. Now I'm going to be checking in all these slides at the end of this video, so all these links should be available if you need to look at those. Basically, my architecture is going to be as follows. On the front end side, on this far left side, we're going to have our Angular code, which is all in TypeScript. There's going to be a call. There's going to be a module I'm going to be using called HTTP client, and it's going to make RESTful API calls to the server, which we're going to create in this video. This video then has a router of its own, and it intercepts whatever is not recognized by the Angular client will be recognized by Node.js in the server, and it will process those. Typically, it'll be calls to the database to get recipe information out. So this will in turn, via the Elasticsearch client code, will be communicating to Elasticsearch itself, which is that node process that we launch. So that's how all of these pieces work. So we're going through several different languages, and but what's common is we're using JSON information as payload, and also when the data responds back, it'll be in JSON format. So this whole thing is tied together here. So to get started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in some of these files from an existing recipe database that recipe project I've been working on. So the first thing we're going to do, like we said here, is I'm going to bring up my program, and at the command line. Oh, and I got to be careful here that I've got the right. The recipes is what I'm referring to, just to save time, and the one that we're working on is the tutorial. So far, I made a couple of changes. All of these changes will be seen. What we're going to do is, at the end of the video, I'm going to commit the changes and then add a tag to it associated with this particular video. That way, as I go along, you'll have all the latest. So in here, we're going to go into our Angular recipes project and then do a Npm Install Express, and then we want to save it to the package.json file. If we look at our package.json, we should see now Express. The latest version of Express should be in here. We'll see how that's going to be used shortly. We also will probably need the client, but I'll do that a little bit later, the Elasticsearch client. Now, the way the structure is going to work everything under this directory that you see here on source is going to be the source code for Angular. I'm going to create another directory called server, and that will be the Node.js code. So that will represent the server. The client, browser, whatever, cannot see that code. They can see some of the code within the source. That's exposed through the browser, even though it's kind of condensed down. But any of the code that's in the server that we're going to create, so I'm going to create a new directory called server. Anything we put into here is going to be pretty much private, because we may even add security to this program eventually. Now these also at the root level, these are all Angular files, but I'm going to add a special server file that kicks it off. So once you, instead of doing ng-serve like we've done using a proxy server, I'm going to use Node to launch our application. So in order to do that, I'm going to, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy a special file into here from my reference project. So this file here. So to get at this, I do reveal in File Explorer. I'm going to copy server, and then I'm going to go into the tutorial, and I'm going to store it at this level. So we got that. Now if we switch back, we should have go back to our tutorial. We should have the server code. Now I've got this on the slide itself. Look at the I've got the essence of what this file is, and what's going to happen is, before, in order to test our Angular program, all we had to do is essentially make do an ng-serve, and then make changes. It would automatically compile an update and launch our web page to look at that. Now that we're breaking that, we're not going to be using that proxy server anymore. We're going to be using a real server. We need to invoke the server using a different command. We're going to use the node command. So we used npm, which is the node package manager, and node itself is a process. And we're going to point to this file called server.js. It's a JavaScript file. And in it, we need to be able to, so when somebody types something into the web address box, which represents the URL, everything's got to be routed through Angular. Now that's happening automatically when you do ng-serve, but with our new code, we need to actually do this explicitly. So if we go to our source code in the server.js code, this is all done through this command here. So this code kind of represents a top-level router. So you see Express. The format for accessing these packages from on the server side is using this require. So it's very similar to import. So that once you do this, now you've got an object that you can call functions on. So we need path. We need Express. Path, I think, is internal. We need to turn this into, we don't need this parser, I don't think, so probably get rid of that. When you see this under the Visual Studio Code, usually there's a warning. So this is It's declared but never read. So you can kind of see these. It's not really an error. So what's going to happen is, what you want is, you want a URL which is going to be kind of directing to your different pages. Anything that's accepted by Angular itself, you want to go to Angular, but all the other routes need to be going to the server. So to do that, it's this command here. If we go to this command here, it sort of intercepts all these and then sends it down to what's going on here. What's this dist recipes, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's another command in Angular called ng-build. And every time we make changes, now we'll have to build or recompile. What it does is it creates and stores all of our source code into a JavaScript format into this directory here. And so what this is saying is direct everything to this sort of top level index HTML file. And then a lot of the magic will happen in Angular. So this step is not obvious. It was not obvious to know how to do this. That's why the value of these these videos. I'm trying to do some things that are not obvious to many people. So anyways, so if we look at the other parts of the code, what I want to do is I want to create a special API that's going to be called from Angular when I want to get recipe data. And I want it to be in a certain format. So when I put in the main URL, if I add API to it, and then after that / some other directive, it's going to do what I want to do. So if I want to get all of the recipes, I want to be able to have Node.js Express be able to intercept that. So you have to sort of add these kind of directives here in the server.js. So I'm having two. One is for importing the data to get started, and then this API is mainly for fetching data for the window, for the web pages for the app, so that you can display the recipes. Eventually, I'll probably have API-edit, so you can actually edit and create new recipes in the application itself. So that kind of explains, you got to have that. And then once you create this API import, you will have to actually create a router within the server itself. Now, this is empty, but we're going to create some routes. So that's going to be intercepted by the Node.js. Now remember, Node.js is written in JavaScript, and Angular is using TypeScript. Also, since we are using our computer is the main endpoint for all of these calls, all these requests, somewhere you're going to have to define what the computer's ID, its IP address is. And arbitrarily, I'm going to pick a special port because we're already using port 9200 for Elasticsearch. I'm picking 98 for this application. So you can just kind of arbitrarily pick what you want here. If this was going to be a public application, I would use probably the default of 80. But in this case, I've got quite a few apps that I run, and 98 is a good one, good port to use. This sets up a listener so that it listens to essentially what the user does in the browser. So, okay, so we've got that. If we go back to our reference, we're going to have to add in. So remember, I'm going to create the server, and it's going to be in this folder. The source folder is Angular. This is going to be the Node.js backend code. And in here is going to be another directory called routes. So this identifies the routes. And since we defined API and API import, in the route, in our use, since this is the kind of the format that's going to be in the URL, I've got to use this exact type string. So in here, if you look under the routes, I'm going to have a JavaScript file that's API import and API.js. So these have to exist. So I'm going to actually copy this, these set of routes into the server from here. Now this HTTP_CACRT was created by Elasticsearch as an extra sort of certificate. And without that, with our security on, we can't make these calls to Elasticsearch. Also, we will, in this code, you'll see that we actually have to give the username of Elasticsearch in that password. And the way I do that so that you can't see the password in the source code itself, because the source code is going to be public, I'm going to do it through an environment variable on the Windows machine. And you'll see how that's done. So I'm going to go into Reveal and Explorer. And I'm going to copy these two guys. Into our tutorial at the server level. Switch back. Sorry. And so we should see that here. Now, can we run this? Now, before we were using ngserve. Now, from now on, whenever we make changes, we have to say ng build. Now, it's possible we're missing something. It's possible that there might be some errors. Not sure. At this stage, you got to make sure that this, this file is taken from the Elasticsearch config file. This one might be out of date. So what it's going to be doing here, when you first come up, you will not have this distribution file or folder. With a build, it creates this, so it sort of converts the TypeScript to JavaScript, and allows us to route to the server itself. So that seemed to be okay. We do get these warnings, and we can modify this in the angular.json file to bump up what the requirements are for the. So now, is this enough to actually run the server? If I say node, so remember node is another thing that we install when we install the npm. It's the node.js. And I've got a little message that basically, if everything is cool, it'll say running on this IP address at port 98. Now what that means is if I bring up, so now we're going to have to change slightly our launch, because if you look at our configuration, and that's defined in our launch file under .vs code, we're doing localhost at 4200. Instead, we'll be interested in launching off of this. So what we can do is we can add a configuration and say we want to launch Chrome. It'll add a new configuration here, and it defaults to this. And what we'll do is we'll change this to 192.168.1 to 203 with the port of 98. Now let's see what happens. Things don't always go first time. So now if we drop down, we've got 2. If we run this off of, we can change this to say launch Chrome on server. And we get no errors, I think. Yeah, so it brings up, this would fail if it didn't work. So it's bringing up our blank web page. And this is where we're going to start putting in our landing page for this app. So it's really hard to put a lot of information in one video. That would be less than 20 minutes. So we're hitting the 20-minute mark. The next video, so I'll check this code in and I will add a tag to it. And I'll add some comments to some of the videos of where to go to on GitHub, if you've forgotten that. In the next video, we can then actually import in some of the recipe data and actually see it in raw form. I'm not sure if we'll get to the point where we're actually displaying it, but we've got to, before we do that, we're going to have to create a little navigator here so we can go to different pages. And we'll start some styling stuff. But amazing enough, that's how long it took to create a server. I mean, we're literally now on a server. Now, granted, this thing is only accessible by my Wi-Fi, but I literally could go to my iPad right now, type this in, and it'll get to the same page. It's no longer localhost. It's no longer something you can just run on computer. But it's not public. And there's a few more things you have to do to make this a public website. Not a lot, but usually have to get a domain name, pay a little bit of money to GoDaddy or some other site. And what you do is you find your static IP address that usually comes with your modem, and you register that with GoDaddy, and then you can use the friendly domain name in place of this IP address. And by default, when it's public, it uses a port of 80. But since this is all development right now, and we just want to look at it, and it doesn't have much security on our side of it, I'm going to leave it at that. So until next time, happy computing, and I apologize for my scratchy voice, but it's allergy season again.